Ellis Mill is a distinctive and iconic part of Lincoln's skyline. It was built in 1798 above the steep slopes of Lincoln Edge to catch the prevailing wind. It fell out of use during the Second World War and was restored to working order by the Civic Trust in the 1970s.
Mill started way back. People just rubbed two stones together to make flour. It was very slow, it was very difficult. And so they invented a rotary quern, which was just like this, except on a much smaller scale, done by hand. Women's work, two women working at the mill, one should be taken and the other spared. That's biblical. And the mother used to turn the handle of the quern and her daughter fed the grain down the hole in the middle. So the daughter fed the grain down, and the thing that feeds it in today in a mill like this is still called the damsel. So the damsel is still feeding the grain in. That was very slow and tedious. So they invented water mills, but in lots of places there was no water, or not enough water, no big hills. That's why on this side of the country you get lots of windmills where there's not so much rain and not big hills. On the west side of the country, big mountains, lots of water, not so many windmills over there. So that's why windmills developed, and particularly on the east side of the country. First one we know about was at Weedley in Yorkshire in 1185. And very shortly after, in 1241, there was a windmill in Lincoln. I'd love to tell you it was this one, but we don't know which one it was because there were quite a lot. But certainly in 1241 there was a mill, and that was before the cathedral was even finished. They hadn't even started the angel choir. So we were here a long way back. In this part of Lincoln there was a mill here, not necessarily this one. As the population grew and grew and grew, you needed more and more windmills to supply the grain for the people. Bread was the staff of life. People ate bread. Back in 1551, there was a great famine and destruction of the whole people of the city of Lincoln because there was no wind for 5 weeks or more. No wind, no power, no flour, no bread, empty bellies. And people ate hardly any cheese or meat or things like that. The poor ate bread. No wind, no power, no flour, no bread.
This record from 1551 describes such an event happening in Lincoln.
In consideration that there hath been a great lithe and no wind for 5 weeks or more, whereby the bakers and other persons could not get any corn ground at the windmills, and so could not bake any bread for the sustentation of the king's people. And some persons in consequence get their wheat ground at one horse mill and some at another, and upon querns, as hath seldom been seen within the city. And by reason of such scarcity, some in the beginning bought horse bread to eat, but at length could not get any of the same to the great famishing and destruction of the whole people of this city, especially of the poor. It is ordered that the bakers shall bake their bread after the assize of 24 shillings the quarter of wheat, and speedily provide carts or horses to send their wheat and other grain to be ground at watermills in the countries.
So windmills had their faults, the biggest one being that if there's no wind you can't run the thing, and we experience that even today. We make a lot of flour and then the wind may not blow for weeks and we run out before the wind blows again. So that was the problem with windmills. But in the 19th century, the number of windmills in Lincoln increased enormously because so did the population. The population grew from around 10,000 to 50,000 from 1800 to 1900. And a windmill like this would supply about 1,000 people, and you couldn't build enough mills, and even if you did, there often was no wind. And during that century, steam power came in, and roller milling instead of millstones, and that could make flour at an enormous rate any time of the day or night. The co-op had a big mill down on Waterside Moors, and that's gone now, as have most of the mills, because there are even bigger mills in other places. With the big change in technology, with steam milling and later electric milling and big rollers instead of millstones, you could make flour at any time of the day or night. And of course people didn't want to wait for a windmill. If there was no flour to be had at the windmill, everyone went off to the co-op or the other mills in the town. So windmills declined, but at one stage in 1842 was when there were most mills up here, and there were 6 mills in Mill Road, this little road outside the gate here, and there were 3 more around the end of the road. So there were 9 mills within about 400 metres up here, all going. That was 1842. That was the best time for milling, really, in Lincoln. But they were having a job to make a living, and they all gradually declined. And Ellis was one of the last ones to be run. The Ellis family originally had a wooden post mill at Burton Village, but post mills were very vulnerable. They burnt down or they rotted away. And it's said that John Ellis, who had the post mill there, the story is that he ran it so hard because he got no flour that he shook it to bits and it collapsed. And there's certainly a picture of the mill, a heap of rubble on the ground. At that point, he decided it couldn't be restored, and he came into Lincoln and bought Ellis Mill, which was a brick tower mill, a lot more solid than the wooden post mill. And so it's been called Ellis Mill ever since that time. John died in 1920, and his wife Eliza was the owner, and her son Frank ran it. And when she died in 1933, Frank Ellis took it over, and he ran it until World War II. Albeit on just 2 sails. At the beginning of World War II, he broke another sail, and you can't run a windmill on 1 sail, so he took it out of use, and all the machinery was taken away for the war effort. You know, it was used to make bombs and battleships and stuff like that. At least I suppose it was. They took all my mother's aluminium saucepans as well to make Spitfires. I don't suppose they ever flew, but you never knew. So that was the end of the mill as far as a working mill was concerned. And then after the war, it was bought by a property developer. He couldn't get planning permission. There was a big disastrous fire. The inside was burnt out. And that was the close of play. If it had not been for the Civic Trust, it wouldn't be here now. Windmill sails have been used to signal for centuries. If you see the sails in a St Andrew's cross, that means the miller's not there. So if you've got a load of grain to be milled, it's no use going to that mill because the miller's gone away. If you see them in St George's Cross, that means back in 5 minutes sort of thing. It means a temporary stop, so the miller is still there. If you see the sails where they're just before top dead centre, that's a happy occasion, like a wedding or a christening or something like that. And if you see them just after top dead centre, just passed over, that's the funeral. And we still do it. We did it for the royal wedding. We did it for 30 years of the mill. We did it when the next door neighbours died. We did it when one of our millers' mothers died, because it's a respectful thing to do to show. So there were happy times and sad times, and we put the sails in that position. I don't suppose anyone in Lincoln, except the immediate neighbours, realise what we're doing, but it's just a nice mark of respect.
Ellis Mill is Lincoln's last remaining working mill. As such, it is an important part of the industrial history and heritage of Lincoln. It was restored by the Civic Trust, Thompson's and Sons millwrights, and many volunteers, including Barry Brooke, who was Ellis Mill's first post-war miller. It is now owned by Lincolnshire County Council and is run by a group of local millers. Thanks to the dedication of these people, Ellis Mill still produces flour over 200 years after it was built.